The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
I was really interested in the member's contribution and then it suddenly stopped. I would have thought, given his extensive experience in civil defence matters, that the Parliament could have really valued his contribution, but perhaps he'll have another go at another time. But he won't be able to on this bill because this is the third reading. I'm really pleased to continue Labour's support for this bill and also to acknowledge that right up until the Committee of the Whole House stages, the Parliament seemed to be working collaboratively to the point where the supplementary order paper by my colleague Claire Curran, Labour's spokesperson in this area, was accepted and adopted, and that was really the final improvement to the bill. Our committee, the Government Administration Committee, I think worked really hard and thoughtfully. We had some high-quality submissions. Potter Williams, my colleague from Christchurch East, acknowledged the submission from the Christchurch City Council, and that was an excellent submission, but it actually was one of many that really helped us think about not the theory of the bill, but of course, as is really important with civil defence, how that theory was going to be turned into practice. What happens on the ground? We learnt a lot from the Canterbury situation, and that's why I was keen to hear from Ian McKelvey, because I haven't heard quite so much about the Manawatu and Wanganui flooding issues, and I'm sure they learnt a lot from that. But one of the big issues that we learnt in Canterbury was that people want to put their hand up to help when they see other people in trouble. New Zealanders' first instinct, and it was certainly the case in Canterbury, was what can we do to help? And civil defence, admittedly, it was the February 2011 quake was so serious and severe. Civil defence were really pushed to get it right, but they didn't know what to do with volunteers. They had no idea of how to engage with volunteers. And I remember Sam Johnson, who at that time was heading the Student Volunteer Army. I remember Sam being so frustrated because he had said, we have hundreds of students who can't go to lectures during the day because our buildings need checking if they're safe. We're fit, young, fit and able, and we want to help. We want to do something, and civil defence said, go away. We don't know what to do with you. And Sam, fortunately, didn't take that as the last response. He said, we know that people, particularly in the east, have silt up and down their driveway. They can't get out, they can't move around their streets. The streets are covered in silt. And the silt was a metre high at that stage, and they just got on and did it. The volunteer farming army as they're called, did the same. They didn't wait to be organised and approached, they just got on and did it. Fantastic New Zealand attitude. But what we have to ensure is that people who do put up their hand to help are connected with the proper civil defence response so that we get the best out of everyone, and that we never put any volunteers into a situation which would do more harm either to themselves or anyone else. Of course, they wouldn't do that intentionally, but if they didn't know what was going on, they might. Communication between the formal civil defence organisation and volunteers is critical. I don't think that we've got it right yet. It involves a culture change. It involves ongoing communication between the various sectors that respond to an emergency situation. And even through the last stages of the Select Committee, we were still waging a bit of a battle with the Honourable Jerry Brownlee about how much engagement would be directed as part of the legislation. The Select Committee, in the end, were successful in our negotiations with the Minister. So I want to acknowledge that the Honourable Jerry Brownlee has shepherded this bill through the last stages, but I also want to particularly acknowledge the Honourable Nikki Kay, who's on sick leave at the moment, and I really hope that she's back soon. She did an excellent job of preparing this bill, not just in working with the officials, but also in working with people from other parties, people representing territorial local authorities who are critically involved in this. She listened to people on the ground as well. And throughout this entire process, Nikki Kay, Honourable Nikki Kay, has really responded to the submissions that the Select Committee heard, the voices of people inside and outside Parliament, and worked in a very open way to give us the best bill possible. And I want to commend her for that. I noted that the Government Administration Committee had worked hard on this, but I also want to particularly acknowledge the officials. They got a lot of hard questions. They were asked to do a lot of additional work to contact people who had submitted to see what they would think of the committee's initial response to their submissions. They did a fine job. They're a credit to the public service, and this bill is better for their work as well as for the way the Minister and the committee worked and the quality of the submissions. And so it should be. I want to echo the words from my New Zealand First colleague, Clayton Mitchell, who noted how good it was that all of Parliament had contributed and felt part of this process, and that we've got a very good bill as a result. When you're talking about civil defence and emergency management responses, that is exactly the way that Parliament should respond. We shouldn't have grenade throwing or cheap petty comments as part of that. We should do the best job possible, because we know that there's Honourable Simon Bridges has just agreed with me. I might change my mind. The expert at cheeky petty comments. The only time actually that the Minister Simon Bridges is praising is when he's looking in the mirror, and then he is highly praising. I said to him the other day in the corridor, I've heard a rumour that you're going to be the Minister of Education, is that right? He said, I haven't heard that, but I'd make a very, very, very good job. He said, it is true. It is exactly, that's word for word. No, I'm sure you couldn't do worse, actually, is what I'd say, and that's not particularly high praise. Just going back to some of the concerns that were raised, and I think have been mentioned in previous contributions to this bill. This bill is only part one of part 2 and 3. We were keen to hear about what might be comparable in this bill in terms of the structure of civil defence, the way they liaised with local authorities and the way they liaised with volunteers. Is the next stage, which deals with much bigger events, going to be on a parallel path to this in terms of the structure? The officials couldn't really answer that, so I assumed from their response that the policy work hasn't yet been done or signed off by Cabinet. That was a bit frustrating, because we want to know that the work and effort that we put into this is passed on to the next stage, so that that structure is as robust as possible. We weren't given a time frame for that next bit of work either, and that was immensely frustrating to the committee. We felt that if this was going to be a path of quite significant change in the way we respond to civil defence emergencies, that the least we could expect was to have a timetable from Minister Brownlee, but we weren't able to get that either. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to, I don't usually praise these guys, I'd like to acknowledge the insurance companies. They literally, I acknowledge them rather than praise them. They bear the financial brunt of these situations, and of course in some of the more significant ones, the Manawatu and Wanganui floods that we discussed earlier, the Canterbury series of quakes, we've had a lot of financial costs. And the insurance companies, while speaking to mitigate the risk that they were exposed to, and so they should, that's their role, that's their business, they also, I think, made a very thoughtful contribution to a much broader range of policy issues than just the narrow business focus of mitigating their risks. So I want to acknowledge and thank them for their contribution to that. As I said, Mr. Speaker, this is a really important bill. I think the way that Parliament responded to it is to our credit, and that's not always the case in the way we respond to legislation. The submitters and the thought that went on right through to the Committee of the Whole House have made this a bill that I'm really proud to support. Thank you.